But now I'd like to ask Mr. Stepanyan to provide his testimony. And I just want to underscore, we're not using the clock because your testimonies are so important. We don't want to limit what you have to say, so I look forward to your testimonies.
Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. In my written testimony submitted to the Commission, I have presented numerous facts and details regarding the crimes committed by Azerbaijan against the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, or as we Armenians refer to it as Artsakh. I stand before you today both as a resident of Nagorno-Karabakh who has personally witnessed and experienced the consequences of Azerbaijan's systematic genocidal policy, having been forcibly displaced from the homeland under the real threat of physical destruction, as well as an ombudsman who, due to his mission, has become a witness and documentarian of horrific crimes against humanity. When Azerbaijan blockaded the Lachin corridor in December 2022, under false ecological pretexts, I was unable to return home for 3 months. I was a human rights defender who could not go to the people whose rights I was meant to protect. 3 months later, I was able to return to Artsakh through forest roads, the roads that were extremely dangerous to travel. The real hell of the blockade was not as tangible from a distance as it was on the ground, when I saw with my own eyes the consequences of this disaster. I saw with my own eyes how people, including over 30,000 children, were living in cold conditions without gas, with frequent electricity outages and struggling to find food every day. I tried to tell the world as much as possible, hoping to break down the wall of indifference that had been created toward the fate of Artsakh people, but in vain. I have seen children looking at me with starving eyes and their suffering parents. I have seen people with chronic diseases deprived of medicine and the elderly and disabled struggling for daily bread. I have seen crowded bread lines and people returning home empty-handed from these lines. I have listened to Artsakh doctors who were constantly alarming about malnutrition and miscarriage among pregnant women. At the same time, I have seen people fighting for their rights every day, their only goal being to live with dignity on their own land. And gradually that hell became more terrible. On June 15, Azerbaijan completely cut off Artsakh from the outside world. Even extremely scarce humanitarian aid shipments coming to Artsakh through the ICRC were stopped at Azerbaijan's demand. Day by day, the supplies on the ground were depleted while new supplies were not being delivered. After 9 months of deliberately starving us to death, Azerbaijan attacked the people of Nagorno-Karabakh on September 19, on this very day a year ago. For 24 hours, the bombings and artillery fire did not stop. Azerbaijan was destroying everything, cutting off roads between communities, not even allowing the bodies of the dead to be transported to Stepanakert. To avoid Azerbaijani attacks, people were displaced from their homes through forest roads and tried to find shelter in Stepanakert. The streets of Stepanakert were filled with forcibly displaced people who were simply sleeping on the streets without proper food and clothing. Starting from September 24, under the real threat of physical annihilation, the entire population of Artsakh had to leave. People, driven by despair and chaos, were leaving their homes, not knowing what awaited them. Freedom House qualifies these events as ethnic cleansing, while the International Association of Genocide Scholars as genocide. We were forcibly displaced from our homeland in front of everyone's eyes, in front of the eyes of the Russian peacekeepers who had come to Artsakh in 2020 to ensure peace, in front of the eyes of the United States of America, which a week before the attack declared that it would not tolerate a new attack on the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, in front of the eyes of the European Union, which was negotiating so-called rights and security with Azerbaijan at the highest level, in front of the eyes of civilized humanity, which watched indifferently as the 1,000-year-old indigenous Armenian people were uprooted from Artsakh, centuries-long Armenian land, which was annexed to Azerbaijan by the decision of dictator Stalin, in front of the eyes of the UN International Court of Justice, whose decisions Azerbaijan continues to ignore, remaining unpunished. A year after the forced displacement, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh continue to live in suffering. witnessing on daily basis how Azerbaijan is destroying our homes, leveling our communities and holy places, erasing all the remnants of Armenian trace from Artsakh, continuing to illegally detain Armenian prisoners of war and hostages, including representatives of the military political leadership of Nagorno-Karabakh. And guess what? Azerbaijan is not being held accountable for the ongoing crimes. No. Surprisingly enough, it is actually allowed to organize prestigious events like COP29 in its capital. Distinguished colleagues, today the people of Nagorno-Karabakh continue to face numerous challenges. To address them, I propose the following. Ensure proper international support for forcibly displaced persons from Artsakh. The support provided by the Republic of Armenia with its limited resources is not enough to address the needs of the displaced, resulting in thousands of displaced persons living in poverty, facing numerous socio-economic problems, including housing and dignified employment. Targeted sanctions should be applied against Azerbaijan for its aggression against Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia, and the war crimes committed toward them. Azerbaijan's impunity must end for the establishment of peace in the region. Peace is not possible without accountability. If Azerbaijan believes there is more to gain through war, it has absolutely no reason to agree to peace. Efforts should be made for the immediate release of Armenian prisoners of war and hostages illegally held in Azerbaijan. We are witnessing that exclusively legal tools cannot achieve results, and only strong international pressure and enforcement can force Azerbaijan to release illegally detained persons and provide information about missing persons. Comprehensive international pressure on Azerbaijan is also necessary to prevent vandalism and destruction of Armenian historical and cultural heritage in Artsakh, and the appropriation of private property by Azerbaijan. And finally, it is necessary to create a reliable international platform to address the possibilities of collective, dignified, and secure return of the people of Artsakh under international protection. The issue of the collective return of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh is currently absent from the Armenia-Azerbaijan negotiation agenda, which is unacceptable. And I think that you will agree that peace built on the broken faiths and violated rights of the thousands cannot be sustainable and long-lasting. Thank you very much.
Mr. Stepanyan, thank you very much for that very detailed testimony and recommendations, all of which we will do everything we can to implement. So I thank you for that. That was very, very, very powerful. I'd like to now ask